Hi guys, I'm Kajal and today we are going to start with the video on Java exception handling. So this is the very first video in Java, but I hope that this will feed your knowledge base a bit, and definitely you'll like this video. If you do so, please do like and subscribe the channel, and let's start with the video now. So suppose we have this test class, and inside the test class we have this main function, right? So what does this exception actually means? So our program is generally divided into, or whenever we want to run our program, we have to first of all compile it, right? So generally there are two steps that has to be followed, right? So the first step is the phase where you actually compile your program. So how do we do that? So suppose this is our program class test, and inside it we have our main function, and we are saying that Java C, that is pass it to the compiler. What do we have to pass? We have to pass test.java, right? So we pass the test.java, and it is saying that see, there is no problem in running this program because compilation wise it is absolutely fine. So what is this compiler is checking? It is checking for the syntax, right? So it is checking for the syntax. Syntax basically means the rules and regulations, right? The rules and regulations that our program must follow, right? That our program must follow. What does it mean? It means that if I'm writing something like this here, that int equals to 23, so it will say that see, you have to have one variable in which you can put this value, right? You cannot not just define a data, a primitive data type, and then you cannot equate it to 23 because you are not declaring the name of the variable in which you want to put this value, right? So if I'll compile this program again, it will show me certain errors that are saying that it is not a statement, right? The semicolon is expected, or it cannot understand what actually you mean, right? So now if I'll correct this statement, I'll say that int number is equals to 23. So the error will go, right? So now if I'll compile this program, it will say that absolutely fine, your program is absolutely fine, and you can very well run it, right? So when we run our program, now this is the place where we have compiled it, and now I want to run this program. So I will pass to the JVM the class file. What is the name of the class file? The test.class file, right? So I have passed it to the compiler, and there are no exception at all. So it means that exception occurs at runtime, when you actually are running, when you actually are allocating a space for your program, for your variables, for your classes, in the method area, in the heap area. So when the actual memory allocation is going to take place, when your programs statements are actually going to be executed at that time, that is basically called as the runtime of the program. So at that time, if suppose any error will occur, that we will call it as an exception or maybe an error, right? So there are two things that can happen at the runtime. Either an error could occur or a runtime exception could occur, right? So what could this exception be like? So suppose I have written here int a is equals to 34 divided by 0, right? So syntactically this line is absolutely fine because you have one variable, you have declared the data type to it, and then you are dividing two numbers, which is actually absolutely fine with the program syntactically, that two numbers can be divided, right? So if we'll compile this program, there will be no error at all, right? There will be no syntax error at all. So now I'm compiling this program, and see, it is working absolutely fine. But as soon as I'll run this program, so I'll say that pass to the JVM the test.class file that we have, and it is saying that see, certain exception has occurred, right? Exception in thread means, so it is saying that the main thread that you are running, so main thread is basically the thread which runs this main function. So the thread that is running this function has witnessed an exception. Which type of exception? So it is showing the details of the exceptions as well. It is saying that some arithmetic exception has occurred, and what is the message it is giving? It is saying that divide by 0 is the problem that has occurred, right? And in which function does it has it happened? So it has happened in the test.main, that is test class's main function is the place where this exception has arrived. So the one thing that is clear from this picture is that exception basically happens at runtime. Exception happens at runtime, right? And as soon as any exception comes, your main program terminates its execution, right? So step by step it was executing its statement, but as soon as an exception occurred, it will definitely stop its execution. So suppose I have written something like this, that hello world here, right? I want to see whether or not this line will be executed after an exception has occurred. So let me test it out. So again, I'm going to first of all compile this program because some changes have happened, and then I'm going to run this program to see after an exception has arrived. After that, whatever statement is you have written inside your program, that will not execute at all, right? So hello world is not executing right now. So what does this exception handling means? Exception handling means that once your exception has arrived in the program, now how do you want to tackle it for smooth running of your program? So you want to run your program still smoothly, even in the case of some exception has arrived. You want that, okay, even if some exception has arrived, I want to make my program work properly, right? So instead of following the route 1, it will follow some different route, but then too it should execute fine, right? So how can we do that? The way of doing that would be to enclose your statements from where the exception could occur into a try catch block, right? So we'll comment this out, and now what we're going to do is we are saying that certain exception can come from this statement. So I'm writing some code here, int I is equals to 90 by 0. Some exception can come from here, and after that I want to print two statements, that the exception may have occurred, right? May have occurred. So I want to print this statement. Now I'm saying that enclose the statements, right? Enclose the statements from which the exception could occur into the try block, right? So it is not necessary that from the try block always the exception would arrive, but if it will occur, if it will arrive, then what we have to do is we have to catch that exception, right? So the name of the exception could be anything. Here we are catching that exception that has arrived here into this exception reference, right? This reference is for holding that object which is coming from here, from this line. So this line will basically, what it will do is that it will throw an exception, right? Why am I saying throw? Because here it is written catch, right? So maybe this line will throw some exception object, right? Which type of object will it throw? So some exception type of object it will throw. And where will it be catched? So it will be catched inside this catch block. So this catch block, basically what it does is it holds a reference to the exception object, and it waits for some object to come, right? So if from the try block some exception object will come, this catch block has the work of catching it, and then the user will define the way in which he or she wants to handle the exception. So how do I want to handle this exception? I'm saying that, see, I don't want any fancier things to happen here. I just want a statement to be printed that some exception has arrived, right? Some exception has arrived, right? I just want to print this out, and that's it. So if some exception will come, this catch block has to execute this statement, and we want to say that basically that whether or not the normal flow of the program will be retained, that is, will this statement be executed even when this statement has executed, right? That is, an exception has occurred and the catch block has executed. Even after that, will this work? We want to check this out. So I'm going to compile this program, and then I'm going to run it, and after running it, I come across the fact that yes, the exception has arrived, and this message is printed there that some exception has arrived. It means from this statement an exception has been thrown into this catch block, and the catch block has catched the exception, has handled the exception, and afterwards the normal flow of the program has also been retained. The exception may have occurred, this statement has also been printed. So this is the way that exception handles it. Handles exception handling, basically the try catch blocks handles an exception, that they retain the normal flow of your program as well. So if some line is written after this statement, suppose I have written here, let's this out, this will not work, this will not work in case of exception in above line, right? So this line will not work if some exception will come above it, but as soon as an exception will come, it will the JVM will find a way to handle it in the main function. If it will not find a way in the main section, that it will find some other way, but if it will find some catch block here, it will basically let that catch block handles the exception. But in case this exception has not come, then this statement will very well execute. So let us see these two examples here. So Java test.java, and I'm saying that the exception will, if the exception will come, then this statement will not be executed, right? This particular statement will not be executed. Why? Because first thing is to catch that exception. Whatever exception in whichever line has come, the first task is to catch that exception. Once it has been handled successfully, then the normal flow can be retained, right? So the normal flow after this line can be retained, but this line is basically before the catch block, hence this will not work, right? So after the exception object and before the catch block, so that is the reason that this line will not work, right? So now if I run this program, you will see that this line is not working. But in case there is no exception in this line, suppose I am saying that divide this number by 1. So this is not an exceptional case. So in this case, if I'll run this program again, so it will say this will not work in case of exception in above statement. So this line has been printed, so no exception has come, hence this catch block is not working at the moment, and afterwards the exception may have occurred, that is the line after the catch block, it is working too, right? So this is also working. So up till this we are fine with try catch block. So try catch block is one of the way in which we can handle exception. Now the next question is, what if we want to catch the absolutely same object that has been thrown from here? So you know that the exception that has been thrown from here is arithmetic exception, right? We have seen it. The message was printed by the JVM that arithmetic exception has occurred. So this line is basically throwing an arithmetic exception. So if you want to catch the absolute exact reference, if you want to catch the object in the same type of reference which has been thrown from above, you can even write here the name of the same class, right? So you can mention arithmetic exception as well. So I'll change this message to arithmetic exception this time, right? Arithmetic exception, and here I'm writing that this number has to be divided by 0 in order to throw this exception. So yes, it is right, the exception may have occurred. These lines we are going to have them same. So now I'm going to compile this program again. I'm going to run this program, and I'm saying that okay, arithmetic exception has been cached in here. But what if I will change the name to null pointer exception? So suppose I will say that okay, I want null pointer exception to handle this. So this is also one of the kind of exception. So now if I say that please run my program, so this is the compiling phase and I want to run the program. See, now there is no catch block which can handle the arithmetic exception. So why is it happening? You know the basic concept of this concept wherein typecasting of objects, you must have come across the fact that a parent, right? A parent class can easily hold the child object, right? Or the parent class reference, I would mention that a parent class reference can hold the child object, right? So the same thing is happening here. When you write here exception, right? When you write here exception E, it can easily hold the object of arithmetic exception that has been thrown from here. Why? Because this is parent, right? So exception class is basically a parent to all type of exception. This is the parent to all type of exceptions, right? So whether it is a null pointer exception, file not found exception, file IO null pointer exception, whatever kind of exception is there, right? Interrupted exception, whatever kind of exceptions are there. So this exception class is parent to all these classes. So when I was writing here exception E and an arithmetic exception object was thrown from here, so it was capable of handling that exception. But as soon as I wrote here null pointer exception, right? Now this null pointer exception is not a parent of arithmetic exception, hence it is not able to handle this particular exception object that is coming from the try block. So that is why the exception has arrived, and there was no way in which main could handle it, right? The main function could handle the exception. There was no way, right? So that is the reason that the JVM has to handle it. And how does the JVM handles the exception? It handle it in the way that it prints the message. It prints the name of the thread in which the exception has come. It prints the name of the exception that has occurred. It prints the message, right? Divide by 0. And afterwards it also prints the stack trace, that is in which function the exception has arrived and which all function could not handle it, right? So all the stack trace, it will also print that, right? So if we want to see that, before that, you can also have multiple catch blocks here. So one of the point is that if you want, you can have multiple catch blocks associated with a single try block. That is, you are saying, see, if a null pointer exception will come, that will be handled in this block, right? But if some arithmetic exception will come, then I will handle it inside this block, and I will print here that some arithmetic exception has occurred, right? And in the first place I will write that some null pointer exception has arrived. Null pointer exception has arrived, right? So if you want to associate a single try block with multiple catch blocks, you can do that as well. So I will comment out this particular line now because we know the fundamentals of that. Now if we'll have multiple catch blocks associated with a single try block, so if arithmetic exception object is thrown, that will be caught by this catch block, that is catching the arithmetic exception reference and basically the object into this reference. And if some null pointer exception will come from above, right? If some null pointer exception will come from above, like suppose you have this string s is equals to null, right? Means you don't have any object, but you are trying to access its properties or the functions. So I'm trying to access its length function, but there is no object at all. So there is no way in which this length function can work, right? Because there is no associated object of this particular class. So what will happen? This is the place where null pointer exception arises. So I'll clear the screen. I'll compile my program. I'll run it, and I'll see null pointer exception has arrived. So this particular catch block is working, right? So a null pointer exception object has been thrown from this try block, and the catch block that was capable of handling this was this first catch block, and it is handling it. Even if you will place it downwards, then also this catch block will only handle it, right? So you can associate multiple catch blocks also. So null pointer exception has arrived. So even if some other exception is coming, so you basically in your try block you have written some more code and you're saying some other type of exception, if that will come, what I will do is I will have my parent of all the exception object, exception reference, that will be catching that particular object. So if some other type of exception will come, we'll catch that particular exception in this catch block, the third catch block, right? And I'm mentioning here that this is some other type of exception, right? Some other type of exception. So now if from the try block, if some suppose index out of bound exception is coming, right? So I have declared my int arr is equals to new int 5, right? And I'm trying to access, suppose from ARR I am trying to access the 6th memory location, right, which is not there because we have indices only from 0 to 4, right? So if I'm trying to access that 6th location, obviously that which is not inside our array, so there is no array index out of bound exception exceptionally mentioned here. So that is the reason that this upcoming exception will be caught here, right, inside this third catch block, which is the exception type of block. So if I'll clear this screen this time, I'll run this program and I'll see that this is some other type of exception has come, right? Now if you want to print this message specifically, that what type of exception has arrived, so you can even do this thing, that e dot get message, right? या फिर only e you can print and you can see the result here. So if I print e only, it will show me the class, right? So the simple way of handling this would be by this exception object, that is from above, the the array index out of bound exception object would be coming, which would not be caught by this particular block, right, because it is catching only the arithmetic exception objects, whereas this catch block will also not be responsible for handling that object, but this exception object block will very well be able to handle that. And what will it print? If I want to print this e, that is this particular reference here, so it will basically show me that what is the name of this particular class. So the name of the class is array index out of bound, plus it is also printing the message, that is index 6 out of bounds for length 5. So two things it is basically printing at the moment. If you want to print the stack trace, you can do that as well using print stack trace function. And simply one more thing that is there is that it can print it by default onto the console, so you don't have to mention system.out.println. And now if I'll print this again, so I'm compiling this program and I'm running this program. So see, the stack trace is also being printed. Now talking about this stack trace, in the next video we are going to come up with the solution for what will happen if suppose in some higher hierarchy we are making a call to a particular different sort of functions, and in the higher part of this function call, in the call stack, basically an exception has come. So how would we handle that particular type of exception, how GVM handles it, and these all the test cases we will be seeing in the next video. So if you like this video and if you feel that yes you understand it, please do comment, and that will definitely help me in bringing to you better videos. So thank you, please subscribe and like the channel.